I always believed control was everything. In military life, control isn't optional, it's survival. Every decision, every command, every glance has consequences. My name is Rachel Hale, and for 20 years, I clawed my way to command at Fort Marston, a mid-level operations base nestled deep in the Virginia countryside, surrounded by endless pine forests and the hum of machinery, radios, and logistics that never sleeps. I knew the base, its people, its protocols, like the lines on the palm of my hand. I believed in order, precision, and loyalty, and I expected the same from everyone around me. When I first arrived as colonel, I thought I knew everything about leadership. My staff respected me. My superior officers approved of my methods. My subordinates feared my scrutiny. I prided myself on noticing mistakes before they became catastrophes. But then came Captain Leah Monroe. Leah Monroe was the kind of person who seemed ordinary and yet extraordinary at the same time. Short hair, sharp eyes, polite, meticulous, precise. She moved through the base like she belonged in the shadows, watching, listening, and most importantly, noticing. She noticed me. It started subtly. 3 weeks into my command, I shifted. A few encrypted convoy coordinates, trivial adjustments, nothing major. But she noticed. She came to me privately, calm, eyes unwavering. "Colonel Hale, these route adjustments, they don't match the manifest." I smirked. I thought I was clever, subtle. "Captain Monroe, sometimes orders change above your clearance. Focus on your job," I said. That was supposed to end it. It didn't. Her eyes lingered on mine, calculating, patient, watching. 2 weeks later, I called her out publicly during a department briefing. If Captain Monroe spent less time chasing, ghosts in code and more time completing her reports, maybe we'd have fewer delays. I expected a reddened face, a meek apology, a lowering of eyes. Instead, she endured my words with composure I couldn't understand, patience I couldn't break. There was a fire in her calmness, a quiet resilience I had never anticipated. After that public humiliation, I began adjusting my operations in subtle ways, testing boundaries, probing weaknesses. Every so often, I'd whisper to myself about how control meant power, and the base was mine to command. But there was something different about Leah. She wasn't broken. She didn't flinch. She didn't even stumble. She just watched. Then came the missing logistics file. It was small, insignificant to most, but crucial to me. And suddenly, the blame was on her. Captain Monroe accessed the file using her clearance code, the report said. I felt a thrill of vindication. She had been too curious, too inquisitive. She had to be controlled. And yet, even then, there was a flicker of doubt that I quickly suppressed. She knew. She knew I could be careful, but not perfect. I watched, as she disappeared from the base for investigation, removed from her position, her uniform replaced by civilian suspicion. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself she would crumble. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was planning something, even from the shadows. Little did I know, her patience was surgical, her intelligence precise. She was mapping me, tracking my movements, my errors, my arrogance, all the while appearing to be powerless. And by the time I realized it, the trap was already set. The first real crack in my carefully constructed world appeared almost imperceptibly. A classified logistics file went missing, and the automated tracking system pointed its accusatory finger at Captain Leah Monroe. I felt a grim satisfaction. She had always been curious, poking around where she didn't belong. Perhaps this would finally make her understand that loyalty and hierarchy were absolute. I remember the moment I received the alert. My office, dimly lit by the amber glow of a desk lamp, monitors humming quietly, coffee cold at my side. "Colonel Hale," said Lieutenant Daniels, hesitant, "someone's accessed the restricted file using Captain Monroe's credentials." My pulse quickened, not in panic, but in calculated excitement. Finally, the leverage I had been cultivating was mine to deploy. I summoned her immediately. When she entered my office, she looked composed, almost serene, but there was a glimmer in her eyes, a light I didn't understand at first. "Captain Monroe," I began, controlling my tone carefully. "There's been a security breach. The system shows the file was accessed under your clearance." I watched her reaction. I expected panic, embarrassment, perhaps indignation. Instead, she leaned against the edge of the desk, arms crossed, and said softly, "That's impossible, Colonel. I didn't access that file." Her calmness was infuriating. I forced a patronizing smile. "Perhaps a mistake, Captain, or perhaps someone wants to frame you. Either way, you are now under investigation." The subtle thrill I felt at that moment was not the fear of exposure, it was the delicious tension of control. I had orchestrated a situation where she would be sidelined, her reputation under scrutiny. In my mind, the problem was solved. She would falter. But I underestimated her. Even suspended, she remained meticulous, calm, and precise. I noticed, at first in the way she moved through the base, avoiding unnecessary attention, yet always observing. She wasn't defeated. She was gathering information, silently, without a sound. And I, arrogant as I was, failed to see the threat until it was almost too late. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. I moved shipments, rerouted supplies, and falsified manifests, all the while ensuring that every trace pointed back to Leah Monroe. The system was precise, airtight, or so I thought. Every step, every order, every digital footprint was carefully placed, designed to incriminate her if necessary. I told myself it was necessary. In command, you have to make hard decisions. Sometimes you have to sacrifice an individual to preserve the greater mission. I repeated that mantra like a prayer as I navigated the base each day, but beneath the surface, a subtle unease began to gnaw at me. Something wasn't right. I noticed anomalies in the logs, minute irregularities that I initially dismissed. A timestamp off by a few seconds, a folder accessed and then closed without trace. Little things, imperceptible to anyone else, but glaringly obvious to someone trained to notice patterns. My intuition told me it was Leah, but I pushed the thought away. I had convinced myself that she was powerless, sidelined, suspended. She could not possibly have the access to interfere. Yet, my mind began playing tricks. Every time I looked at her, even in passing, I felt observed. I found myself double-checking shipments, rereading manifests, scrutinizing audit trails. It was exhausting, but I told myself it was vigilance. Leah, meanwhile, was methodical. She reached out quietly to a few trusted contacts, gathering information from outside the base's direct oversight. She used her civilian consultant position, strategically, allowing her to analyze digital footprints without raising suspicion. Every day I grew more paranoid, not knowing that the very woman I had sought to discredit was now orchestrating her countermove. It was subtle at first. She left traces in code that only someone of her intelligence would recognize. A hidden script here, an anomaly there. Nothing that would immediately betray her, but enough to seed doubt in my system. And I, proud and arrogant, overlooked the pattern, dismissing it as coincidental. Her patience was terrifying. While I acted with urgency, scrambling to cover my tracks and maintain control, she moved deliberately, methodically, always one step ahead. I felt the grip of power slipping, though I refused to acknowledge it. I also began noticing cracks in my alliances. Sergeant Kim, my reliable aide, seemed distracted, uneasy. I caught her glancing at Leah in passing, whispering in corners, and making notes in private. At first, I dismissed it as ordinary caution. By the time I realized she was feeding Leah information, it was too late. The pattern was complete. Leah had mapped my every move, every falsification, every attempt to frame her. One night, alone, in my office, I stared at the encrypted shipment manifests on my monitor, sipping cold coffee, and felt something I hadn't in years: fear. The careful structure I had built, the system of control I relied on, was being dismantled silently by the one person I had dismissed as powerless. The irony was brutal. I had framed her for incompetence, undermined her career, and yet, quietly, she had become the architect of my undoing. I went to sleep that night staring at the ceiling, wondering how the meticulous, disciplined Captain Monroe could have possibly gathered enough evidence to expose me. I couldn't see the trap yet, but I felt the walls closing in. The patient? Predator was out of the cage, and I was walking blindly into her carefully laid snare. It began with whispers. Small, harmless at first, the kind that float through the corridors of every military base. But I knew how rumors worked. Once they started, they spread like a contagion, unstoppable, untamable. I'd overhear fragments. Did you hear about the audit? They say the colonel's numbers don't add up. Monroe's suspension might be lifted. Each phrase was a nail driven quietly into the coffin of my authority. I summoned Sergeant Kim late one night. The base was quiet, lit only by the sterile glow of fluorescent lights. My office smelled faintly of metal and coffee, the air thick with tension. Sit, I said curtly. She obeyed, her expression unreadable. You've been distracted lately. No, ma'am. You have, I insisted. I've seen it. You've been talking to Monroe, she hesitated. Just a flicker, but I saw it. The hesitation of a liar. I speak to many officers, ma'am. It's part of my duty. Her tone was even, respectful, but I heard the defiance underneath. It was the same tone Leah used when she believed she had the moral high ground. I leaned forward. I built your career, Kim. Don't forget that. You wouldn't be where you are without me. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment I thought she'd break. But then she met my gaze, steady and unflinching. With all due respect, Colonel, she said. None of us would be anywhere without integrity. The words hung in the air like a blade. I dismissed her, but inside I was seething. Integrity. The word had become a weapon. I used to think of it as a virtue. Now it was an accusation, a reminder of what I'd buried long ago under layers of ambition and justification. That night, I went through every file on my secure drive, searching for signs of tampering. And there it was, a single folder, misnamed by one character, hidden deep in the logistics server. When I opened it, I froze. Inside were copies of my falsified reports, not the originals, but duplicates. Modified, annotated, and time-stamped to show the precise moments I'd altered them. Leah hadn't just found my trail. She'd mirrored it, keeping digital proof of every manipulation I'd ever made. My stomach twisted. She'd been watching me for months, maybe longer, waiting for the right time to strike. I tried to delete them. Access denied. A line of text blinked across my monitor, simple but terrifying. Colonel Hale, you taught me precision. Now I'm teaching you accountability. I stared at the words until they blurred, rage and fear boiling in my veins. It wasn't over. I wouldn't let it be. I would find her, stop her, erase every trace of my weakness, or die trying. Leah Monroe had disappeared. Not physically. She was still on base, working quietly, officially reinstated after the investigation cleared her name. But she had vanished in every other way that mattered. She wasn't the obedient officer I once commanded. She had become something else, calm, cold, calculating. Her reinstatement was the result of a sudden intervention from the Inspector General's office. Someone had leaked concerns about corruption within my command structure. That someone could only be Leah, but I couldn't act directly. Not now. Every eye on the base was watching both of us, so I adapted. I began planting false leads, crafting data trails that looked like desperate attempts to frame her again. Sloppy, rushed. I wanted her to think I was panicking, losing control. I wanted her to move faster, to make a mistake. She didn't. She played her game in silence. No confrontations, no visible defiance. Just quiet efficiency. She'd walk past me in the corridor, her expression unreadable, but her eyes said everything. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Every day that passed, I felt more isolated. My allies grew distant, my superiors colder. Reports I submitted took longer to process. Calls went unanswered. Even my secure channels began showing connection errors. Then came the anonymous email. No name. No sender ID. Just one line and a single attachment. You should have stopped when you still had a choice. The attachment was a recording. Audio. Heavily filtered but unmistakable. My voice, my words. A conversation I had with a foreign contractor 2 months earlier about rerouting funds from logistics to unofficial channels. I remembered that night. I'd been careful, cautious. Or so I thought. But Leah had been there, somewhere in the shadows, recording everything. Panic clawed at my throat. If that recording reached command, it would destroy me. I'd lose my rank, my pension, everything I'd built. I called her to my office the next morning. When she walked in, I studied her face carefully. No arrogance, no triumph. Just that unnerving calm. "Captain Monroe," I said, keeping my voice measured. "You and I both know the importance of discretion in this line of work. Whatever grievances you may have, we can resolve them internally." She tilted her head. "Grievances, ma'am? Don't play games with me," I snapped. "You've made your point. But if you continue this path, you'll burn with me. You think the brass will see you as a hero? They'll bury you right beside me." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled faintly. "With respect, Colonel," she said, "I don't need to be seen as a hero. I just need the truth to be seen." She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You taught me that control is everything. But you never realized control can't protect you from consequence." And then she was gone. I stood there, staring at the door long after it closed, realizing with a sickening certainty that she wasn't bluffing. She had evidence. Enough to end me. I wanted to believe I could outmaneuver her, that decades of command, of surviving politics and war, would count for something. But for the first time in my career, I wasn't facing an enemy I could intimidate or silence. Leah wasn't after revenge in the way I understood it. She wasn't screaming or threatening or gloating. She was methodically dismantling me, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the truth I'd buried under years of deceit, and I could already feel the ground crumbling beneath me. The first domino fell on a Monday. I was in my office reviewing procurement logs when the alert came through. "Urgent, command inquiry, logistics irregularities." At first, I thought it was procedural. Routine audit, maybe triggered by one of the supply discrepancies I hadn't yet buried. But when I opened the file, my blood ran cold. Every falsified report, every altered manifest, every off-book transfer, all of it, presented in chronological order, annotated in red, with cross-references to command protocols and fiscal laws. Each infraction carefully cataloged, each falsification supported by data. There was even a summary at the bottom. Cold and efficient. Conclusion, Colonel Rachel. Hale knowingly falsified logistics data and diverted military resources for unauthorized operations. At the bottom of the report, Leah Monroe's digital signature. My world tilted. I tore through my desk drawers, shredding old files, deleting drives, calling in favors from every contact I had in the network. But every attempt failed. It was like she had anticipated each move, every defense mechanism I could possibly employ. By afternoon, Command had issued a suspension pending investigation. By evening, my access was revoked. I sat in silence in my office as the guards came to escort me out. Their faces were expressionless, but I could feel it. The judgment, the satisfaction, the fear. As they walked me across the base, I caught sight of Leah. She stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, her uniform crisp, her expression composed. Our eyes met for just a moment. No words. No smirk, no triumph, just quiet finality. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence was louder than any accusation. As the gates closed behind me, I realized something with a clarity that felt like ice cutting through my chest. I hadn't just been outsmarted. I'd been outdisciplined. She'd beaten me not with power, but with patience, the very virtue I once believed was weakness. And now, she was free. The following weeks were chaos. Investigators combed through everything I'd ever touched. My home, my emails, even old off-base accounts. I tried to contact old allies, but one by one they turned away. My name had become radioactive, a career-ending stain. A month into the inquiry, I was summoned to testify before the military tribunal. They showed me the evidence, all gathered under warrant, all irrefutable. But what broke me wasn't the data itself. It was the precision. Every timestamp aligned perfectly with actions I'd taken. Every forged authorization linked back to my ID. Every discrepancy traced to my decisions. And embedded deep in the final report was a single note, a line added at the very end. Not from Leah's official submission, but from an encrypted message metadata log. Integrity isn't inherited through rank. It's proven through consequence. She wanted me to see it. She wanted me to know this was deliberate. Not vengeance through violence, Vengeance through truth. It was surgical, controlled, unavoidable. By the time the hearing ended, my fate was sealed. I was stripped of command, demoted, discharged. Without honor, the empire I'd built from the ground up, gone in a single day. It's strange how silence can feel. Heavier than any explosion. Months passed. The military world moved on. New officers replaced me, new protocols were put in place. My name became a case study, whispered in training rooms as a warning about hubris and corruption. I relocated to a small house near the coast, far from the desert base where I'd once ruled with absolute control. I spent my days alone, haunted by echoes of command, the distant hum of helicopters, the bark of orders, the illusion of power. For a long time, I told myself Leah had ruined me, that she'd been vindictive, disloyal, manipulative. But the longer I sat in silence, the more I realized she hadn't ruined me. She'd revealed me, every choice I'd made, every manipulation, every rationalization. It all led here. I wasn't the victim of betrayal. I was the architect of my own destruction. Still, some nights, when the wind howled against the windows, I'd imagine her voice. Measured, calm, relentless. You taught me precision, Colonel. Now I'm teaching you accountability, and I'd wonder if she ever thought of me, if she ever regretted what she'd done. Then one day, months after the tribunal, I received a package. No return address. Just a small envelope sealed with wax. Inside was a single photograph, Leah Monroe, standing at the base of a new logistics command center. Her nameplate read Major Leah Monroe. She had been promoted. Commended for her unwavering integrity during a corruption investigation. On the back of the photo, a short handwritten note. I didn't do this to destroy you, Rachel. I did it so no one else would become you. I stared at those words for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. For the first time in years, I cried. Not for my career. Not for my loss. But because she was right. Power had blinded me. Control had corrupted me. And Leah Monroe, the woman I'd underestimated, had become the mirror I'd spent my whole life avoiding. I folded the photo, placed it in the drawer beside my medals, and closed it gently. And for the first time in my life, I whispered the words I'd never said to anyone. I was wrong. Outside, the sea was calm, and for a fleeting moment, so was I. Years later, Leah's story would be told in ethics seminars and leadership workshops. Her quiet defiance, her discipline, her moral courage, immortalized as an example of integrity under pressure. No one mentioned my name anymore. Only the corrupt colonel who fell to her own ambition, and that, I realized, was the perfect revenge. Not humiliation, not ruin, oblivion. The story wasn't about Rachel Hale anymore. It was about Leah Monroe, the soldier who reminded the world that even in the military, the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a drone, it's the truth.